All right, guys, welcome back to Module 2. This is video number 3, and I'm super excited about this one because this is something I'm super passionate about, and I just want to jump right in. So this video is called The Truth Behind Deal Closing, and I want to start by talking about the 80-20 rule, which is also called the Pareto principle. And if you've never heard of this rule before, it's okay. I'm going to explain it to you. But it's just kind of a general rule that this guy Pareto kind of figured out that happens in life. It's this weird distribution of things. And he actually went and studied this in multiple different avenues of life, and it was true in all of them. And by true, I don't mean it was exactly 80-20, but it was very, very close to it. And so he studied, I believe it was like department stores, and they figured out that 20% of their customers bought 80% of their products, and 80% of their customers only bought 20% of their products, right? And then he figured out that it was just true in business at all, like, 20% of most people's businesses. Then he found that it was true in business as well. He figured out that like 80% of most companies' revenue comes from 20% of their customers, and 20% of their revenue comes from 80% of their customers, and so on and so forth. And so for this particular program, it's true that 80% of your results come from 20% of your tactics, okay? Which also means the inverse. It also means that 20% of your results come from 80% of your tactics, okay? So do we want to focus on the 80% of our results or the 20% of our results? Obviously, we want to focus on the bigger chunk first, the 80% of our results. And those are only going to come from the small 20% of our tactics. So we need to master those 20%, okay? We need to find the 20% that can be easily leveraged, and we need to leverage it, okay? And now I want to talk about communication, because communication is even more extreme than the 80-20 principle, okay? And so there was this doctor out there named Dr. Albert. I'm going to mess up his last name, so I'm just going to call him Dr. A. And Dr. A, he has a study he did where he found that 7% of any message is conveyed through words, 38% through certain vocal elements, and 55% through nonverbal elements, facial expressions, body language, gestures, posture, etc. Okay, more than half of our communication is done via facial expressions, gestures, and posture. Okay, only 7% is actually done through the words that we say. Okay, that's why I'm not going over the script right now. I will later in a later video, but if you don't have this down, it really doesn't matter, right? So this is why I'm starting out with this stuff, because it's, first of all, you already do this, you don't even know you do. And second of all, it's just such an easy way to really 10x your business. Like if you're not doing this, it's just silly, okay? So the truth is, guys, we already use body language and tonality. Okay, in fact, I've been using it this whole time. When you guys hopped on our webinar, I was using body language and tonality our whole time. Now, the difference between me and you is I'm using it consciously, and you're about to do that very, very quickly. Now, I want to make one thing clear. Once you see this, you can't unsee it, okay? Once you start to notice this in life and you start to use it, you can't not ever use it. Like, you're always going to use it. And it's so powerful that I just ask that you use it for the right purposes. Okay, I'm going to be talking about Jordan Belfort a lot in this video, and if you guys don't know who that is, there's a movie made about him, The Wolf of Wall Street. The reason why I'm talking about him is because he has a book called The Way of the Wolf, which I'll talk about here in a second. But anyway, I highly recommend you read his book because this dude's a genius as far as body language and tonality. But unfortunately, he did not use it for the right purposes. He defrauded hundreds of millions of dollars from people, and he went to jail for a couple years for it. And all that. So I just ask that you guys use this stuff for the right reasons, because it really is that powerful. And I mean, I'm not even going to go into depth with it, but let's just put it this way. There's a lot to it, but it's very easy to master because we're already doing it. Okay, it's just a matter of being conscious that, like, in the way that you use it. Okay, so let me give you guys an example here. Let's say you guys are hanging out, and I come over, and I'm like, hey, and I walk into a room, and I'm like, how are you today? Like, you're going to be like, well, what the fuck is your problem, right? You're going to be like, man, this guy's a dick. Like, what do you mean, how am I today? Like, how the fuck are you today, right? And let's say I walk in a room like, how are you today, right? And you're like, oh my God, what is this guy's problem? Is he crazy, right? Same question, but now I went from sounding like just a dick to now I'm crazy, okay? What if I walked into a room and I was like, how are you today, right? Now you're like, okay, this guy's a fucking robot, okay? Excuse my language, by the way, but my point is I'm saying the same question over and over and over again. I'm just saying it differently, and yet it means completely different things to you, okay? If I walk into the room and say, hey, man, what's going on with you today, man? Right? You're like, okay, this guy thinks he's Michael Jackson, first of all, but second of all is he seems pretty genuine, okay? But if I walk into the room and I'm like, hey, man, what's going on with you today, man? Right? Like, very casual. I'm basically saying the same thing. okay? But I sound like I genuinely care versus I've walked into a room and I said, hey man, how are you today, right? Like it's the exact same question, but I just said it differently, right? And so my point is with this is tonality matters greatly. I cannot talk today, guys. Tonality matters greatly, okay? It is a difference literally between coming off as a creep versus not. And I have this creepy pickup artist here because if you guys have been to a club before or to a party when you're in high school or college or whatever, and, you know, guys are trying to meet girls, girls are trying to meet guys, and there's like that one guy that's like really creepy, okay? And the truth is that most of those guys that are like, they come off super creepy are really not that creepy. Like if you actually get to know them, they're just pretty normal guys, but they don't understand tonality, okay? And they don't understand boundaries. And those are the two reasons why they come off as creeps. And the ladies that are watching this are probably like, amen to that, okay? So they come over and, you know, again, some of them, I'm not here to talk about dating, but there's guys out there that are just really creepy and all that. But the ones that I'm talking about are not. They just don't know how to talk, okay? They don't know how to communicate. And so they come over and they say, you know, hey, what's going on with you? Like, and you're like, what the fuck do you want? Like, what the hell, right? Instead of like sounding like a genuine person and like having a regular conversation. Okay, that's my point. So the difference in being a creep versus not being a creep, okay, and being successful, and coming off as genuine versus coming off as just a mean person or as a robot or as a crazy person is literally in just how you say things. It's that simple. Like I wish it was more complicated. I wish I had some like master secret plan, but it's not. It's just how you say things, okay? So that's number one. Number two is body language actually equals tonality, okay? You can't say certain things with a tonality without doing certain body language, okay? And I'm going to talk to you guys about the different tonalities, about the body languages that go with it. But I want to give one example here. And we're actually going to go through and break down a couple presidential speeches here because you're going to see they all do the exact same thing, okay? They all do this. It doesn't matter who you believe with or what side you're on. It does not matter. They all do the exact same thing because it works, okay? And so if you watch the greatest public speeches of all time, which we're going to watch some of the presidential speeches, when they're making an important point, they cup their hand, and they all do it slightly differently, but it's all basically the same thing. And they slam it down over and over again like a hammer, and then they make their point. And then they usually pause immediately after for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds, okay? And then they continue on, okay? And they do this because, number one, is it helps them make the point. Like that pause at the end, it's like, I'm telling you right now, surplus funds is the absolute best way to make money ever. Now, see, I just paused and you're like, wow, like, holy shit, that guy just made a point. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm going to go into this in more depth. I know this is a lot coming at you right away, but I'm going to break it down here. So just, if you don't get it, don't worry about it. I'm going to go slow in it as we get along with this video, okay? So this is just a few pictures of presidents doing it. You've got Trump, cupped his hand, he's making a point clearly. You've got Obama, cupped his hand, making a point clearly. You've got JFK, cupping his hand, making a point clearly. And we're actually going to watch a quick minute from each of these guys' speeches, and I'm going to show you exactly, you know, why they do this and what they're doing. So let's go ahead, let's hop in and watch these speeches. And again, we're just going to go through this real quick. I'm going to break it down for you guys.
Democracy can buckle when it gives in to fear. So just as we, as citizens, must remain vigilant against external aggression, we must guard against a weakening of the values that make us who we are. And that's why for the past 8 years,
Okay, so you guys just saw right there, Obama is giving a speech. This is from his farewell address back in 2016. And by the way, I want to make this really clear. This is not, I know I talk about politics, I talk about controversial issues. I'm not here to make a political stance, okay? So I don't really care what your opinion is on Obama. I don't really care what your opinion is on Trump, who we're going to go over next, or JFK, or whatever. That's not the point of watching these videos, okay? And you need to be able to compartmentalize that. Okay, let's say you're anti-Obama. Okay, when you're watching this Obama speech, don't be thinking about, oh, Obama sucks. Be thinking about, okay, what is he doing? How is he trying to persuade people? Because that's what you want to learn, okay? And same thing with Trump. If you're anti-Trump, okay, in fact, in the speech, he's literally talking about immigration. If you're super anti-Trump and super pro-immigrant, whatever, okay, it doesn't matter. Just put that aside, okay? Put aside your dislike of Trump or your dislike of Obama and just understand that we're using this for learning purposes, okay? I hope you guys can be mature about this, okay? But you notice when Obama finishes that statement, he cups his hand, okay? He kind of drops his voice a little bit, and he makes his point, and then he pauses. Now, this is not a great example because the thing about Obama is, like, if you watch any of his speeches, I mean, you saw the first 10 seconds, he pauses every 5 seconds, okay? He's very methodical, he's very slow public speaker, which is just kind of his style. But where this becomes really obvious is actually in Trump's speech, because Trump, if you watch one of his speeches, he's like, like he just keeps going, right? But then he'll make a pause, and it's really powerful because that's a huge pattern interrupt, okay? Whereas Obama, it's a little bit less noticeable because he kind of just does it naturally.
In order to develop a list of regions and countries from which immigration must be suspended until proven and effective vetting mechanisms can be put in place. I call it extreme vetting, right? Extreme vetting. I want extreme. It's going to be so tough. And if somebody comes in, that's fine, but they're going to be good. It's extreme.
Okay, now we're watching the Trump speech here, and you see again, Trump is much more of a all over the place speaker than Obama is. He's very energetic when he speaks, right? His hands are moving all the time. But you noticed as soon as he started talking about extreme vetting, all of a sudden what happens to his hand? His hand closes up, okay? He looks directly straight ahead, and he starts almost increasing levels of the volume of his voice, and he really makes his point clear, and he says it's going to be tough, it's going to be extreme, and then he kind of pauses for a second, looks over the side, and I had to cut it here because the pause is actually like 5 or 6 seconds, but the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is again, it's the exact same thing Obama's doing, they're just talking about different things, okay? They're just trying to make a point, okay? And so what are they doing? They're cupping their hand, and boom, they're making the point, they're being aggressive with it. This is a tonality we're actually going to talk about later, but I just want to give you guys examples of this being used in the real world.
But this peaceful revolution of hope cannot become the prey of hostile powers. Let all our neighbors know that we shall join with them to oppose aggression or subversion anywhere in the Americas. And let every other power know that this hemisphere intends to remain the master of its own house.
All right, so just a recap of what we just saw there. Again, the exact same thing, guys. This has been going on for all of human history, by the way. Okay, this is not a new concept. And you can see this is kind of a tough video because it's so old. This is JFK in his inaugural address in, I don't remember what year he got inaugurated, but I believe it was 60. I might be incorrect with that, so I apologize. Was not alive then. But anyways, this was from, the 1960s. And literally you can see this is before they had the prompter, so he's literally got a piece of paper he's reading a speech off of. And he literally gets so into this speech, his hand goes out of the podium, starts making a fist, he makes his point, then he tries to bring himself back in. He pauses, he goes back, finishes making his point, but you can still see his hand making that fist and really getting his point in. He's hammering with his hand that point in, okay, until the Americas are going to be safe, or whatever he says, and then boom, then he stops, he looks around, audience cheers for like 10 seconds, and then he continues on with his speech. But it's all the same thing, guys. This has been going on forever, okay? So my point in saying this to you guys is this is not a new concept. This is something you can learn very easily because I guarantee you've done this before in your life. You just didn't even realize it, okay? And all of these you've done before and you didn't even realize. So now it's time to be conscious of it and actually use it. That's going to be the key for you guys to be successful. But it's not learning a new skill. A lot of people get worried. They're like, I got to learn something new. It's like, no, you're just kind of doing something and you're knowing about it versus doing something and not knowing about it. So that's it for the speeches. Let's go back to the slides though. All right, so hopefully that makes sense, guys. You guys can look these videos up on YouTube. Just look up the link, and I'll try to link it down below too. And then those are the timestamps for when what I showed you guys actually happened. So it's been used for a long time, and presidents do it all the time. And the reason why I chose presidents to do it is because it's just so obvious when they do it. Not that it shouldn't be. It's pretty obvious when anyone does it, but there's just such good examples of it with president speeches because they're always trying to make points that tonality is always prevalent, okay? So another one that's really obvious is secret telling. So if you remember back when you were like an elementary school kid or like in kindergarten, if you went to kindergarten, like preschool or something, And if you remember, like when you told a friend of yours, some sort of a secret, right? Like, what did you do? Okay. Well, you probably went up to your friend and you're like, hey man, I gotta tell you a secret. And your friend's like, ooh, like what is it, right? And then you went up and you put your hand over your mouth and then you whisper. You're like, pss, 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 pss. And then Samantha over in the corner is like, what the hell? They're talking about me, right? She gets all mad. But the point I'm trying to make here is, like, if you did the exact same thing, you whispered and all that, but instead of walking up and covering your hand in the mouth, you did it from 10 feet away. You're like, hey, dude, I gotta tell you a secret. And your friend's like, what is it? And you're like, pss, 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 pss. Your friend's like, what the fuck? What are you saying, right? So my point is that body language and tonality, they go hand in hand. And if you try to do the opposite of this, it just doesn't make any sense, okay? The tonality that the presidents were doing that is called absolute certainty. And we're going to be covering that here in a second. I'm going to go through all of the major ones. There's, I believe, 5 or 6 of them that I'm going to be covering in this video that are pretty important for surplus funds. Absolute certainty is one of them. But here's the thing, guys. If you try to do the absolute certainty thing without physically making your body absolute certain of whatever it is you're talking about, it's going to be impossible. Like, if you think of like the most uncertain person in the world, like someone that's like very unconfident, very shy, very timid, and you think about how they probably walk around. They probably walk around, they don't look up, they look down, right? And they probably maybe they hunch their back a little bit. They not really hunch their back, but their shoulders and their chest, instead of being open, it's kind of closed, right? You can kind of imagine that. And so then imagine that person trying to say what Trump said about immigration the exact same way. Okay, it just wouldn't work. Okay, it doesn't even make any sense. And even if he was able to like tonally like figure it out, like where his voice sounded very similar to Trump's, where it's like he's making the point. If his body language was different, people would be watching this and be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? In fact, there was actually a presidential election, it might have been JFK, I don't remember, a long time ago, where people that were listening on the radio thought one person should have won the debate, and then people that were watching thought another person should have won the debate because that person's body language was so much better than the others. So the point is they go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. Even if you're doing phone call sales, you can't, like, it just doesn't work, okay? You have to do both, even if no one's there. And again, guys, the point of all this is that we're already doing all this subconsciously, okay? All we need to do is make it conscious and control, and it's actually very easy to do, okay? Now, I want to recommend you guys read a book here. I mentioned Jordan Belfort earlier. Okay, there's this book called Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort, and this book, in my opinion, is the best sales and marketing book that is tied into body language and business, okay? At least that I've read. There are obviously better body language books and better tonality books, but they're kind of theory-based, and this one is based, not only is it based on things that he's actually done, but it's also based on sales and marketing specifically versus just like body language for body language sake, which is great, but it's not really going to help you right away. So I would order this book if you can. I'm sure it's like $20. You guys can get it on Amazon or whatever. It's a great book. The other side of this is he also covers the straight line sales method, which I mentioned earlier. So if you're interested in that too, it's a great book. Really recommend you check it out. So the different tonalities that we are going to be covering, or that are vitally important to surplus funds, are the 5 that follows. Now there's more than this, but I'm not going to cover those because I don't think those are very important for this program. And I just don't think they're necessary. And these 5 will get you a lot of results. This is the 80%, or this is the 20% that will get you the 80% of results, okay? The first one is scarcity. It's followed by the reasonable man, then absolute certainty, the I care tonality, and then uptones, okay? All of these names are taken directly from The Way of the Wolf, by the way, so I'm just going to keep those just for simplicity's sake. So if you read that book, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and you'll be able to kind of compare what I say with what Belfort says. Anyway, scarcity. This is actually probably my favorite one, maybe tied with uptones, okay? And scarcity is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful tone. And I tell you this, it's only the most powerful tone if you use it correctly, okay? And you cannot overuse this, okay? It's very easy to overuse this. If you overuse it, it won't work, okay? So you have to pick and choose when you use this one, but it's super, super powerful. And what makes it even more powerful is if you tie it with absolute certainty, either before or after. And I'll get into that later, but it's super, super powerful. So this is the whisper tone, okay? That's kind of an easier way to remember it. So by dropping your voice, people become naturally curious. So if me and you, if we were gossiping about someone, right, which you shouldn't be doing if you're on the 30-day cleanse, by the way, but if I was gossiping about David, right, my business partner, and I was like, hey man, I got to tell you something about David. And you're like, what is it? Well, you got to promise not to tell anybody. And you're like, well, whoa, like, what is this guy talking about? Well, what is it? I won't tell anybody. Okay, so look, it's just a regular day, and David called me, and he told me something really, really weird. He told me that his car had broken down, right? And he seemed very confused. He said, I'm not even saying anything logical. I'm just making shit up as I go. But because I dropped my tonality, it's like, whoa, what's this guy gonna say? Okay. Versus I'm like, yeah, David called me the other day, man, and he told me his car broke down, and he told me he was kind of confused. And like, you know what I mean? It's like, okay. So whispering, it makes people naturally curious, okay? And so it brings a sense of scarcity. So how do you use this in business, okay? I'm gonna actually break down a clip from The Wolf of Wall Street, from the movie itself, where he uses this. And that clip obviously was scripted. This, I'm just going to make this up on the top of my head. Hopefully it'll be somewhat good, okay? But that one will be better because it was scripted. But so you'd start by using probably, some sense of the absolute certainty tone where you say, hey, Rick, I've got something very important to tell you about your unclaimed property. Did you know you have unclaimed property? Right? By the way, that's another tonality we'll get into later. And then, Rick would say, oh, I had no idea. What is that? He's like, all right, Rick, well, listen, if you've got 5 seconds, this just came across my desk that I think it's really going to blow you away, okay? Did you know you're owed upwards of $10,000 right now, right? So instead of saying, did you know right now you're owed upward of $10,000? Okay, so you see the difference right there? Hey, did you know right now you're owed upwards of $10,000? Right, I'm kind of lowering my voice level. I'm bringing people in. And that's a bad example, but hopefully you get the point, okay? So there's a quote, if you want people to listen, yell. If you want people to really listen, whisper. And that's the idea behind this tonality, is whispering. Now, can you overuse this? Yes, I mentioned that already. You cannot go on and whisper everything you say, okay? Otherwise, they're going to think you're just trying to whisper, okay? It's going to be confusing. So you have to whisper at specific times, okay? And that's what makes this one powerful. If you just did it the whole time, it wouldn't work, okay? All right, reasonable man. This one's pretty cool. So reasonable main, apparently, is what I have. Okay, ignore that. But reasonable man is used to imply that someone would be ridiculous to do otherwise. So if me and you are talking on the phone and let's say we just met on the phone, whatever, and I let you know, hey man, you're owed some money. You say, no, I had no idea. I say, hey man, well, if you got a minute, man, I can actually explain to you exactly how you can get it and how, if you're interested, how I can help you, free of charge. Got a minute? Right? So by saying got a minute, like with that tonality, what I'm doing is I'm implying that to say no to I don't have a minute would be unreasonable, okay? It would be like, dude, like I'm a reasonable person, you're a reasonable person, we're two reasonable people. I'm asking you a very reasonable question. I'm gonna help you make $10,000 that you didn't even know that you had, hypothetically, right? And I'm just asking for a minute. Like I think that's a completely reasonable request. And by you saying no, you're a silly human, you're a ridiculous person, okay? That's what I'm implying, okay? So this one's pretty powerful as well. And it also is kind of similar to uptones, which is my other favorite one. So I really like this one as well. Okay, absolute certainty I talked about earlier is the same tonality that you saw the presidents using. And the thing about this one is you're just using strong declarative statements said with enthusiasm and authority followed by a pause, okay? Or followed by, does that make sense, or are you with me? So that's one way of using it. The other way I don't have on here is by following it with the scarcity tonality, okay? Either before or after. So I'm not gonna give you an example of this because in the movie they do just an amazing job showing how this ties in with the scarcity tonality, because it's really, 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 really powerful stuff. And I don't want to like mess this up and give you guys the wrong impression of it. So I'm just going to wait. But just know you guys have seen this already with the presidents. You guys will see this with the movie clip that we see here in a few minutes. Okay. The next is the I care tonality. Okay. The I care tonality is another phrase for it is the utter sincerity tonality. Okay. And it's just the sound of true sincerity, implying that you truly care about them without saying it. Okay. And this is used by lowering your voice level and slowing the pitch down. So obviously, like when I read this, my mind jumps to when someone's going through a hard time and they're telling you about it. You're not gonna, like, if someone tells you about their divorce, you're gonna be like, okay, that's awesome, dude, but like, so like what happened? Like, you're not gonna be like all excited about it. You're gonna be like, oh my God, like, wow, so what ended up happening with the divorce? Like, is everything okay, right? That's kind of what this tonality is. It's lowering the voice. It's saying I care without saying I care, okay? Maybe that should be a quote. But It's about slowing the pitch down, because when you're talking fast, like I'm talking now, I'm trying to get a lot of information out. I know I talk fast, by the way, I apologize, but I'm trying to get a lot of information out, and so I'm not trying to be sincere with this information. But if someone were to come to me and say, Spencer, I had a very tough day today, and my wife left me, and my house is getting foreclosed on, and I have to move and all this stuff, and I wouldn't be like, wow, okay, so your wife left you and you gotta get divorced. Like, I wouldn't keep talking fast. This guy would be like, this guy's weird. Okay, I'd be like, oh my God, like, what happened? Is your wife gonna come back? Like, what if you don't mind me asking, like, what happened, right? So slowing the pitch down, dropping your voice level a little bit is how you do the I care tonality. And this is great for, again, it's not just used when people are going through bad things. I don't want to make that sound like it's the impression I'm giving. It can be used at any time. It's whenever you want to say I care without saying I care. So if I'm talking to someone about helping them solve their problems with surplus funds and they're owed money, and let's say they're owed $5,000, instead of coming in and saying, I'm going to help you get these $5,000 right away, and you're going to be amazingly happy, like, that's great. That's absolute certainty, okay? That's actually an extreme absolute certainty. I wouldn't do that much. But the point I'm trying to make is I might use a little bit of that, but I'm also going to tie it in with the, I'm going to help you get $5,000 so you can take care of your family. Now, I don't know about you, Rick, but I'm assuming that $5,000 would help you out right now. Am I crazy in assuming that? Because some people we call, they're not very interested because money's not really an issue for them. But would $5,000 help you and your family out? Right? You see, that's a very extreme version of I care, but it's for me to demonstrate the point to you guys that you're saying I care without saying I care. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, this is probably the easiest one to demonstrate, is the uptone tonality. Okay? We use uptones all the time, like literally all the time, okay? And this is the proper way of asking a question, okay? If you actually care about the answer, okay? So basically the uptone tonality, to explain it, is ending questions with a slightly higher pitched voice than starting them. So for instance, if I said, how are you doing today? Okay, that's not an uptone. If I said, hey man, how are you doing today? Right? You see how I kind of ended with just a slightly high-pitched voice, and I'll do a really extreme version of it. Hey, man, how are you doing today? Right? You see, that's a very extreme version. Now, this is the part that you have to be careful with uptones. You can't be too extreme with it. Like, if you just did that to someone on the phone, or, at Chipotle, as we'll talk about here in a second, like, they're going to be like, this guy's full of BS, he's faking it, or he has a really high-pitched voice. Like, what's wrong with this guy, okay? So it's just a minor upbeat tick. It's not even noticeable a lot of times, okay? You really have to be looking for it to notice it. So, yes. And this, by the way, this little secret, the uptones, is like the big difference between charismatic and non-charismatic people. Okay, non-charismatic people, they don't do this. Okay, they come up to you and they say, hey, man, what's going on with you today? Right? Like, they talk like that. And you're like, dude, this guy's like a drill sergeant. Like, what the hell? So that's the key with this one, is it's just slightly higher, but you have to do it in order to, it helps you sound a lot more charismatic, and it'll get people to think you're genuine, which is kind of the key to being charismatic. And by the way, I'm teaching this, guys, you guys should be actually genuine, okay? So yeah, this is how you show compassion and genuine interest. And again, I discovered this at Chipotle. I told you guys that story about the woman in front of me that was very rude. Well, since that, which was that day, which was many years ago now, I told you guys I went to Chipotle for a long time every single day, and I would go, and the people in front of me, maybe they wouldn't be as rude as her, but they wouldn't do the uptones in their questions. So they might ask, hey, how are you doing today? But it would be, hey man, what's going on with you today? And the guy making their food would be like, this guy doesn't really care about the answer. But I would come and ask the same question, but by adding this uptone, they'd be like, oh, this guy, he actually cares, okay? So again, I discovered this at Chipotle. Try it out if you go to Chipotle or wherever you eat. Try it out with a waiter at next time you go out to eat. I'm telling you, it will greatly change the way people interact with you, okay, if you do it correctly. All right, so let's see this in action. I'm super excited to show you guys this next clip. I'm going to really be breaking down here just a really great sales scene that uses a bunch of these tonalities. And how he uses them and ties them together, because it's really powerful stuff. And by the way, if you guys haven't seen this movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, it's a great movie. I recommend you watch it because it'll teach you about sales, teach you a little bit about business, teach you about what not to do in business. And I just want to make this one thing clear. It's an R-rated movie, and that's for a reason. There's some R-rated movies that are like that maybe shouldn't be an R-rated movie. This should 100%, 100,000% should be an R-rated movie. There's a lot of cursing, a lot of nudity, all that stuff. So if you're not into that, maybe don't watch it. But other than that, it's a great movie, very entertaining. Okay, kind of a long movie though, it's like 3 hours. And I also want to make something clear. I'm not a fan of Jordan Belfort at all. Okay, I think his ideas and his philosophies and all that in regards to this stuff, tonalities and body language, is genius. He's very smart with this. But what he actually did was despicable. And I'm not going to get into that, but basically he defrauded a bunch of people out of a ton of money. I think I mentioned that earlier. But you know what? You have to compartmentalize that like we did with the presidents, where maybe you don't agree with them, you dislike them in some aspects, but at the end of the day, you can learn something from them, and so that's what we're doing here. So let's go ahead. We're going to hop into that clip now, and we're going to break it down.
Okay, great. Well, reason for the call today, John, is something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing I've seen in the last 6 months. If you have 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. You got a minute?
Okay, so just in that first 10 seconds, like this is how crazy this is, okay? Just in that first 10 seconds, what did Leo use right there? He used scarcity, followed by absolute certainty. That's when he took his hand and started slapping it against his other hand, right? And then he switched it to reasonable man. He said, got a minute, right? So in 10 seconds, he used 3 tonalities, okay? And that's what made Jordan Belfort so effective, was he was able to do this so well. Now, this is a masterful level. You don't have to get to that level, but even just using one of these would be super, super powerful, okay?
Name of the company, Aerotine International. It is a cutting-edge, high-tech firm out of the Midwest awaiting imminent patent approval on a next generation of radar detectors that have both huge military and civilian applications. Now, right now, John, the stock trades over the counter at 10 cents a share. And by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that.
Okay, again, so boom, you hear him go right back into that absolute certainty. You can even, before he comes on the screen, you hear him slap his hand again against his other hand, okay? Because body language matters, okay? Body language matters. You cannot be absolute certain. You can't be in that tonality if you're not doing the body language to support it too, okay? So he's absolutely certain, and then boom, he switches to what? Scarcity. He's whispering again, right? So again, go back and watch it. You need to watch it again, but this stuff, it's insane.
Profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000.
Jesus, that's my mortgage, man.
Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
This stock will pay off my...
So you see right there, he goes back into absolute certainty, and then the guy says, hey, I could pay off my mortgage. And he says, exactly, you could pay off your mortgage, right? Like, that's almost a really subtle, it's genius. It's almost a really subtle, reasonable man, where he's like, he's just confirming his belief. Like, yeah, you're unreasonable to think you couldn't. Like, what do you mean? Of course you can. Like, right? So, I mean, it's just ridiculous, but let's continue on.
John, one thing I can promise you, even in this market, is that I never ask my clients to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few. And in the case of Aerotine, based on every technical factor out there, John, we are looking at a grand slam home run.
Okay, let's do it. I'll do 4 grand.
4,000, that'd be 40,000 shares, John. Let me lock in that trade right now and get back to you with my secretary with an exact confirmation. Sound good, John?
Okay, so again, we saw some more of the scarcity. We saw some more of the absolute certainty. And then we said, sounds good, John? Right, he did the uptones. So keep that in mind, too. I wanted to point that one out there because it's used right here.
Great. Hey, John, thank you for your vote of confidence, and welcome to the Investors Center.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Okay, and so that's going to wrap up this video breakdown. We're going to go back to the slides here in a second. But I want to just point out one super tiny micro detail that really just exemplifies my point of how you have to get the body language right in order to get the tonality right. So you see when he hangs up the phone, he says goodbye, bye-bye, and he hangs up the phone. But he's got this huge smile on his face, okay, because he's genuinely happy. Obviously, he just made some money, but he doesn't, it's not like you look at him, it seems like a genuine smile. It's not like it's a happiness that like, oh, I just made $2 grand, like whatever, No, it's hey man, I'm happy I was able to be of service today, right? And so even just that tiny little thing, it's not even a tonality that we're gonna cover, but I just want to make this clear, guys. The body language is so imperative, okay? And if you're having questions on what the body language should be for a particular tonality, feel free to ask me. But also remember this, guys, it's just common sense. If you're whispering, what do you do? Think about when you're whispering, what do you do, okay? When you're making a point, what do you do, okay? When you're asking a question, there's not necessarily a body language that goes with that, but think about what you would do when you ask an important question, right? You might move your hands around, okay? So just, it's common sense. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them in the Facebook group. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Let's go back to the slides now. All right, so that was pretty cool stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And let me know in the Facebook group if you guys enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Make sure you guys tag me. And also, one more thing we got to cover before we end this video is we can learn a lot from reading. And not from reading books, although books do help, but from actual other people. So like the first half of the challenge is to learn how to implement these tonalities and body languages yourself. And then the second half is to actually learn how to read them from people. And you can do that at the same time, okay? So kind of a challenge that I want you guys to go ahead and take on here is take what you've learned in today's video and apply it to your daily life by consciously using those tonalities and body languages. Okay, next time you go out to eat, like I said, talk to the waiter. Use the reasonable man. Use the uptones. You know, scarcely would be kind of weird to use in a restaurant. I mean, I don't know. It's funny. My grandmother, anytime I go out to eat with her, she is one of the most charismatic people I've ever met in my entire life. Like literally every time we go out to eat, she has an hour-long conversation with the waiter, and like I learn all types of things just from sitting there listening because. Like literally, like she can get people to open up and tell their entire story, like their life story, like in 3 seconds. Like it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Like we'll be in there and the waiter will walk up, hey, you know, what would you guys like to drink today? And my grandma's like, oh, I would just love some water, but how are you today? And she's like, oh, I'm good. Like how are you? And next thing you know, the waiter waitress is telling us about their dreams of becoming an actor or what they're studying in school, and they moved from Montana. And it's like, how did we get to this like point? You know? So it's very powerful stuff. But anyway. Try consciously using it, okay, with your family, with your friends, when you go out, all that stuff, okay? And then also look out and listen for when people are using these tonalities with you, okay? Because it happens literally all the time. Like if you go back and you watch the webinar that I did with you guys and you watch the previous videos, like I'm using these tonalities in this video, I'm using the tonalities all the time, okay? And I'm using all of them. I'm not using just the 6 I listed here. So there might be some where it's like, that seems like it's a tonality. It probably is, but I haven't taught it to you guys because it's not really necessary for you. But I'm using these all the time, okay? So keep that in mind, okay? And then finally is, once you're able to spot people's tonalities and body languages and accurately read it, okay? And, not inaccurately read it, because if you spot it, you're like, oh, that's the reasonable man. And in reality, it's like scarcity. You're like, oh, man, I was off, right? But that's the first step. The next step is to be able to identify what their goal is and what their intentions are by using it. And again, most of the time their intentions are going to be, subconscious. But even if it's conscious, most people are not going to be using these tonalities, consciously. Okay, so realize that. And realize you're never going to be perfect with guessing people's goals, but this gives you a huge window into what they're thinking and to what their actual goals are. Like I know, I'll give an example of coaching. So you guys know I coach basketball at my old high school, and I coach freshman B. Actually, we've had 2 years undefeated, baby. Back-to-back undefeated championships. But anyway, I had a kid, as a coach, I got 15 kids per year on my team. So you have a lot of kids. And if you don't know basketball, only 5 people play on the court at any given time. So that means you can't have more than 5 per team, which means that basically, you got 10 people on the bench if you got 15 people. So I'm trying to give everyone minutes, but reality is we're playing to win, and not everyone's going to get minutes. But obviously as a coach, you have people come up to you and they ask you for playing time. And depending on how they ask me for playing time, I can pretty much tell whether they actually want the playing time or their parent is mad that they're not getting playing time and they told them to ask me, okay? Because that happens too, and it's about 50-50. So if a kid comes up to me and he says, hey, coach, can I talk to you for a second? I say, yeah, absolutely, man, what's going on? He says, hey, coach, I was just wondering, I really want to play, more in games. What can I do to get more minutes, coach? Is there anything I can do to earn more minutes, right? So that's a completely different tonality versus if that kid comes up to me and says, hey, coach, can I talk to you? I'm like, yeah, what's up, dude? Hey, man, I just want to know, I really want to earn more minutes. What can I do to get more minutes, right? That's almost demanding, okay? So right off the bat, those two tonalities are completely different. Do they want the same thing? Yes, okay? So just because their tonalities are different doesn't mean their goals are different, okay? So you got to keep that in mind. But anyway, enough of my rants. Hopefully this makes sense, guys. Please, if you guys have any questions on this, ask me in the Facebook group. Realize that it takes a while to learn this stuff and master it, but it's not hard to implement right away. So just take what you've learned from the videos and from this module and just apply it. And by the way, when I go through the scripts, I will be going through when to use certain tonalities, and it'll make a lot more sense then. So realize that, and I'll see you guys on the next video, module 2.4.